This will be the last session, so stay tuned. It's going to be a very good one. We have Isabella here talking to us about diverse teams across all time zones, which is really important. We all went through this now over the course of the last year in this pandemic, so this is going to be an interesting one. We'll let them roll it, and we'll introduce her. Welcome, Isabella, to jsday, and thank you so much for this excellent session that will be locking down 2 great days. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much. Oh, wow. I mean, what an honor to bring us home, right? It's like home stretch, almost there.
That's right, and it's a really great talk. Seeing as you're from a Fortune 500 company, I imagine that this was quite a complex operation, one day being in the office and the next day having to, coordinate this whole thing over time zones, et cetera. What was that like?
You know what? It's actually interesting. It's all about communication because it's about setting expectations. It's about getting to know the people, knowing what's driving them. And otherwise, time zones is really just a great opportunity. And I think that the pandemic has forced us to really see what is really mandatory or what is nice to have, because we just tend to throw it all in one bucket, and then we're suddenly surprised to play firemen, like firemen, firewomen, every time, because suddenly everything becomes a priority. And you're like,
urgent
what
and
is
important.
going on? Yes, and everything. And it's like, when you look at the word priority, that's actually meant for one thing. There's only one thing that can be a priority. And I think it's just amazing what trust and empowerment can do, like true trust and empowerment, because a time zone should not be an obstacle where you suddenly have to get up in the middle of the night to talk to someone because it's a different time zone. When you really have a structure, and we're talking about, right, everything in a network, everything about coding, it's always a structure. But when it comes to people, suddenly no one wants a structure. But once you have a structure, once you have a system, there is no boo-boo word, but it's more about clear tasks, clear expectations. Structure works so you can go to bed, give someone else, the baton to run with it, and then you take over. And guess what? Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but there is no need to get all hot and bothered about it. It's just about structure, and it actually is something good.
That's awesome. So I'm looking forward to hearing the talk. I think it's going to give us a lot of interesting insights. We're going to roll it, but you stick around. We'll have questions for you after your talk. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello und guten Tag, everyone. So my name is Isabella Zaczek, and I'm coming to you live and in color from Düsseldorf, Germany. I'm super happy to be here, and yes, I am a contrarian and a fixer at heart. There is no point in denying that. And what I'm most passionate about are people and processes. And yes, the two go very, very well together. A huge thank you and shout out to the jsday team for putting on this conference, for allowing me the opportunity to spend time with you and talk about a topic that is really near and dear to my heart. And yes, it is about building diverse teams across all time zones. And having lived 9 years in the US and a year in Ireland, 2 years in Scotland, I truly believe that it is possible to build a culture of cultures, and hopefully my presentation will help you or give you some ideas in building those diverse teams. And to make sure we can focus on the presentation, I'll switch off my video for now, but I will come on later on to answer all your Q&As, and looking forward to your questions already. Thank you so much. So, what does it mean to operate globally? So when a company expands into a global market, there are the obvious external requirements, right? Such as rules and regulations, financials, competitors, and infrastructure, for example. But What about your internal structure and organization? How do you want to serve your global customers? How will you stand out against local competitors and gain market share? Do you know the complexity of a market, and is this complexity perhaps beyond your core capabilities and requiring you to remodel your existing operating model? Don't get me wrong, it's not about judging how your current structure is. It's just asking the questions that you want to be honest about, is whether you need to adapt your setup. It really becomes the question of what we see and what we assume. The cultural iceberg, or what I call the true drivers, values, and motivators, as well as taboos, to understand the cultural makeup of your team and the potential tripwires, right, that could impact team building and collaboration down the road. All of these underlying beliefs and assumptions are subconscious. I mean, that's why I call it the iceberg. Yes, we see many things. We love going abroad and partaking in festivities, love the food, love the different types of music and what so forth. But just like the iceberg, what is truly below the surface? I can only advise you to take the time and make the effort to question these, to ask what is below the surface and the potential impact they could have on your team and your customer support in a market. When I was given the opportunity to build a global customer operations team for our global accounts division in a Fortune 500 company, the team and I had to go through a number of questions, and we did it all through the eyes of our customers, their expectations, and the market they operated in. So we looked at the 4 pillars that make up a business foundation, at least in my book. We were starting with strategy, right? That is like the source system, as I later came to call it. The strategy, meaning what industries, what type of customers, headquarter locations, and also really looking at the customers we wanted to serve and attract regarding global spend, growth, and also their potential. We then moved on to the setup of the organization itself, so meaning my team. What support approach would make us really unique? And what is expected in the industry and in the market? What functions, for example, should be merged to create a customer flow and loop? So I like to call it loop, not necessarily journey, because it's not just a start and finish time, right? When you create a loop, you create a repeatable and profitable and satisfactory circle that you want to take the customer around over and over again. Thirdly, alignment. And you'll see throughout the presentation that alignment is a very, very important theme, not just in this presentation, but I also believe in building a team culture, a corporate culture, a company culture, a culture of cultures. So what do I mean by alignment? So we looked at everything that was cross-functionally, cross-culturally, virtually, all the rules of engagement and communication with internal stakeholders, to make sure there are clearly defined interfaces, handovers, and deliverables. And last, but definitely not least, the results. What do customers really expect? Right, so what we did is we presented our findings on what we thought we should measure to a small group of customers whose feedback we valued. Basically including the customer in our thinking, in our doing, truly living the voice of the customer. We were asking them what is important to them and what KPIs they care for. Because when you think about it, you want them to be happy, right? To spend more money with you, to make sure you don't have escalations, to make sure you are working on insanely innovative projects. So we were building their feedback into our thinking and into our doing. And so they helped us define efficient and smart KPIs. And it really was for the sake of everyone, because we all know so well that the more numbers you present, the more you will need to track and explain, right? However, a strong and high-performing team culture is more than written policies and documents that live on websites and in handbooks. While going through all of these stages, my endeavor was to combine respect, leadership, guidance, empowerment, trust, and performance. I know pretty big words, a lot of buzzwords that we're probably sick and tired of hearing because they have been repeated so often, but perhaps rarely lived. But it was the expectation, right, of myself. And this is why I came up with what I call the 80-20 rule. It's a twist on the Pareto principle, but I believe it really has quite an impact on building a team. So let me explain how I came about it or what I mean by it. So the 80% is the core guidance, the philosophy, the one message, or you can call it mission, the vision, goals, objectives. So everything that applies to everyone in the team when working with each other and with our customers, allowing us to being and staying on the same page. The 20% is dedicated to regional distinctions, meaning cultural rituals and preferences and differences, because I believe there will always be differences. And thank goodness for so much variety, no matter what you do, because I believe it's human and cultural nature. The 20% was, however, giving me the freedom to trust my team to be self-sufficient and making decisions right on location, knowing their own culture and market best. In my book, that means true empowerment. This means trust. This means delegating and holding people and myself accountable. I truly believe that it is impossible to manage and inspire people without knowing that it is important to them and what they need to perform at their best. I also believe that when you are operating globally, you will always be the guest in another country, no matter whether you manufacture, whether you produce, deliver, and employ. So once a company understands this, respect, trust, and loyalty will start to grow with your customers in that market. Trust me. My experience has always been that when you make an effort to get to know the culture, and when you are curious about business customs and traditions, an almost instant rapport is created between the company, its employees in that market, and the customers in that market. I think the past year and a half has really shown us that words matter, that language matters, that making an effort and being part of something bigger matters. So speaking about, a tail time out and how I lived those principles and how I experienced effort was especially interesting when I started to support customers in Latin and South America, because it became quite an interesting cultural experiment. So when I met with my customers, for example, in Argentina for the first time, I told them that while I can understand Spanish, I will not be confident enough to reply back in Spanish. Yes, at one point I was trilingual, but I just didn't have the confidence. What happened then was rather amazing. The customers almost immediately relaxed. They provided feedback and talked about business opportunities and insights that I'm pretty sure we would not have heard about otherwise. I believe the reason was simple. The customers deeply appreciated the effort we made, which in turn gave them the choice to speak in whatever language that was comfortable to them during our meetings. It was about choice. It was about respecting that we came in from a different language or from a different background, but we wanted to get their business right. Ultimately, we all went back and forth between Spanish and English, but it was a very comfortable, a very relaxed, a very productive communication and also collaboration. So what's Tony Soprano got to do with it? I'm not sure whether everyone knows The Sopranos, which is a US TV show about the mafia, right? I think somewhere on the East Coast. But when I really dug deep into different quotes from The Sopranos, what I found was that in my 80-20 approach, imagine the 80% to be like The Sopranos, right? One team, one message that were properly organized, fully dedicated and high performing. Based on the principle, we always do everything together. And I think it's not a matter of whether I support the mafia. No, it's really about the band of consistency, which meant that my team and I were partners. And they knew that their questions and concerns were heard and valued, no matter whether they worked out of their home in Colombia, in a data center in Hong Kong, or in a small sales office in Stuttgart. I cannot stress the importance of this partnership, this unity enough. It has the magical power, really magical power to bridge any communication gaps and mitigate against any perceived advantages tied to a specific region. Just think about it, right? And it's probably more valid for all the times, I hope so, before COVID, that you can only thrive or receive a promotion or a better job when you are at a headquarter location or in a big corporate office. Again, if there is like one of the learnings that I'm taking from the past year and a half is when you give people the environment to thrive, you understand what drives them, what motivates them. Promotions, job opportunities should not be linked to being in the same office or in the big corporate office, right? It's about choice again. Some people thrive with, their, team members in the office, others perhaps from home. I think there is a way to find that hybrid, this even cultural hybrid. Global teams have an amazing potential to increase sales and productivity, foster innovation, and reach new markets. Above all, access is key. True access is key to reduce the risk of any regional or cultural silos. Don't get me wrong, and that might be an unpopular position to take, but I believe there will always be silos. There will be silos by default because there are certain job functions that want to stay in silos to be productive, to do the work. It's about understanding whether certain job functions require introverts or extroverts, making sure you give them that freedom. Silo has become such a boo-boo word that I think, again, words matter, but it's also about understanding the actual meaning of a word. It's not meant to alienate people or to build walls between organizations and teams, but it's more about understanding how people like to work. And also remember, this is what those 20% care for, those preferences, those differences. So we are making room for it for the sake of being productive. So what do I mean by access? I mean access to people, access to data, access to systems, technology, and access to management and executives and foremost opportunities, right? The ones that I mentioned before. This is essential to being part of a team and feeling integrated. This is what access and transparency are. So many cultures have their own way in doing things their way. And at times, just because we are only used to our way, it will not appear to make any sense to us, or it will not fit into our way of thinking and doing business. My advice, accept it and find a way to turn this into an opportunity for you to gain a different business perspective. It's not about the right way or the wrong way. And I'm sure, of course, you have principles, right? You have different ways of coding, and in the end, you follow certain formulas and all of that. But what I mean by that is there might be more efficient way. There might be some quirky ways to do the job. And I'm not saying by trusting someone else to do it, you just run for the hills and, let go of any responsibility. It's about learning, because even if something isn't successful, doesn't turn out to be the most efficient way, it's a learning for yourself. It's a learning for the other person you worked with, and hopefully turn that into a powerful new way of doing business, or into a new powerful practice for the two of us and perhaps for the bigger team. So, however, I do also appreciate that there are ways to reduce the strain, right? That cultural differences and assumption can cause on relationships, because it's not all just by opening up that everything goes away. But here are a couple of suggestions that worked for me, and some that I would have loved to invest more time and energy into. Just to, again, use the circle, right? And drill down into the core. You see its alignment there, the big theme I said at the beginning, and down to the core of connection. So the first one is unorthodoxy. And yes, I looked it up. At first I thought it's just, a word living in my head, but it truly is a word. I want you to step outside of your cultural zone, right? Companies to step outside of their cultural zone. It's about diverse leadership appointments from a cultural perspective. Diversity is all the rage, and it couldn't be more important for global management and leadership. Wouldn't you want the setup of a global leadership to actually be global, with various nationalities and language capabilities, to cover a wide range of markets and demands? Well, I would. I would love to see all of that represented, right? Then again, I'm talking about it over and over again, but provide job development and promotions within regions, no matter where you are. Because if you do not open up more possibilities to rock stars that are sitting no matter where, if you're not doing it, it will cause friction and frustration at one point, and dare I say, resentment. And ultimately, it will lead to a lack of engagement and dedication and productivity. Next up, systems, obviously. I love systems, right? No doubt about it. You need good CRMs, you need good platforms, stable environments, video conferencing, as we've really learned, especially again today as well, right? With reaching as many people and stay in contact with your teams to allow for that effortless interaction. But systems are also structures. They're processes that are key to seamless collaboration and productivity. It is how to engage with others. Yes, to establish rules, for the lack of a better word. And then there is alignment, clear role mandates and responsibilities. I think it's one of those sore points when I look back over my career, that if you're not stating clear expectations, setting up clear role mandates and responsibilities, it's causing so much friction and bifurcated processes. And it creates rework, it creates double work. So again, transparent rules of engagements, which also include limitations and boundaries. It's not just going one way and saying, oh, yes to everything. It really is about knowing what are your capacities, what can you do, how many projects can you take on, because just saying yes will lead to a complete strain on resources, on a strain on capacity, it will just frustrate everyone because you cannot satisfy your customers and you will probably not satisfy yourself. And then something that is absolute in my book, priceless and should be mandatory, is trainings on cultural context, on rituals, on sensitivities. It should be company-wide, right? And especially for global leaders, because I bet, if we would talk about it, we could all share some rather embarrassing examples because of the lack of cultural or knowing about those cultural sensitivities. And me, myself, and I, it was probably done with the best intention. I didn't mean to, upset anyone, but if you don't know, you don't know. And what could be better to really foster understanding, common ground, by making sure there are trainings, there are workshops on understanding each other. And last, but absolutely definitely not least, at the heart, at the core of everything, connection. It's actually funny, right? It's a funny word, connection. We live in such a connected world. It's almost to a point where it's too connected. We're always on, we're hardly off. And while it's great, and I love my tech stuff, and I love my gimmicks and all of gadgets and all of that, but what we really need to pay more attention to again, and we've seen it right over the past time now, is that human connection, especially in teams, especially in cultures. And some ideas that worked for my team, and I would have loved to invest definitely more energy and time in that, is exchange programs between regions, not only on the management level, as we always see, right? Where managers are being built up to take the leap, which is great. There needs to be that. But what about allowing different groups and teams, when someone wants to do it, to exchange their ideas and their knowledge? Something else that is important to create a culture of cultures, as I call it, is time in the trenches. Spend time with your teams. I'm calling on leaders here, but it's really not just about being in meetings or on the phone, but in the trenches. Understand what they're doing. I'm not talking about micromanagement. I'm talking about caring by not losing touch with what is happening in the real world. Again, I just started a new job and I'm also responsible for a group of developers. I will not be able to do their job. I will not be able to code, although I've done that 20 years ago, but I need to understand what motivates them again, what is on their mind, what are the obstacles in their way to be more productive and to be more satisfied with what they're doing. So that is really where that innovation and trust also comes from. We all have different strengths, right? We all have different backgrounds, but that is where the magic lies, in understanding and in connecting our strengths for that bigger picture. And then there you go. We're almost at the end. And I know with that time slot, I'm bringing us home after 2 great days of learning and sparking ideas, hopefully. But then there are also the daily things in life, right? Don't forget about those daily things, as trivial as they might seem. They have a huge impact on your employees and your customers. And something that many people don't even think about, but I swear it's probably the one thing that came up the most. Not just in my career, not just as a leader of different, global teams, but also in talks with customers or later on clients. Time zones. Time zones, because when you really hear about how teams are structured, and especially when it becomes virtual, there's a pattern, right? And you hear, oh my God, we always have to be on there at night when we want to spend time with our families, or very early in the morning, but my day is already that long. My advice is to see time zones as opportunities and make sure there is a balance. Please respect them, as well as regional hours of business, and be specific when scheduling meetings. I mean, there are so many probably to list, but especially in a business context, right? It's crucial. It can't just go one way or the other. And see it also as an opportunity to become more efficient and effective, which goes back to what I said earlier on alignments with clear role mandates and responsibilities. How can you structure work? How can you structure tasks that when you go to bed, someone seamlessly can take over and finish it or take it to the next level and continue with the work, and you can get your sleep. And this way you form this loop, right? This continuous work loop in making sure that work is done without everyone needing to be up at the same time. This is what trust and empowerment are. This is where the 80-20 rule comes in, with having standards, having processes, having clearly defined work packages. And then the 20% is work in your different time zones, right? It's just an idea. So good times, great stories, and even greater lessons learned. But flexibility as well as clear communication and instructions are key to build a successful culture of cultures. But let me finish with a quote by Paulo Coelho, who beautifully summarizes my entire talk and presentation. Seriously, I mean, I could have just put up this quote and we could have just talked about it. Culture makes people understand each other better. And if they understand each other better in their soul, it is easier to overcome the economic and political barriers. But first, they have to understand that their neighbor is, in the end, just like them, with the same problems, the same questions. Thanks a million for spending time with me, and I'm putting on my video again so you can see me. Thank you so much again for listening, and let's get and stay in touch. I mean, it's, you'll find me on LinkedIn. Please reach out. We can continue the conversation, and I'm really looking forward to your Q&A now. So thank you again so very much. Have a great evening, and yes, please let the questions come. Thank you so much, and all the best.
Wow, what a great talk, Isabella. Thank you so much. That was really, really important. I think it was extremely useful for engineers, for non-engineers, for anybody in any organization to learn about how to work more effectively in remote and distributed teams. The world is growing. Companies are becoming multinational. So really, really great insights. Some quick questions, kind of to wrap it up and kind of get tap in a little bit more into your wisdom and insights. I'd love to hear a little bit about how you approach it also from a cultural perspective. So obviously in multinational organizations, it's not just about like the time zones, like you said, it's all more about also kind of effectively knowing how to communicate with different cultures and people and being inclusive. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your thoughts on that.
Okay. Yes, it's my favorite part, Q&A, because that is where it's really coming to life. And that's a really great question, because here's the thing. It's really all about asking. Right? To get to know your colleagues, teammates, customers from a different cultural background, it's about asking what they perceive as a good communication on how they want to discuss certain topics, escalations, because most of the problems exist when you base it on assumptions, just because this is how you like to be talked to. Right? And that's not even done out of bad intentions, not at all. It's just many times we try so hard to do the best with all we know, and we still fail. It's hard to call it even a failure because there's no malice behind it. But really, to get to know another culture, it's about asking a lot of questions, because most of us love to talk about it, love to talk what drives us or what is so specific about our culture. I mean, we could spend another 3 hours just talking about weird Germans like I am. So there you go.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And so in terms of organizations, many times the large focus is obviously on the business most of the time, on the product, on rolling out features. How do you get top-down approval to actually invest in culture and training, in bridging these types of gaps, in better communication, and in better, remote team management? I think that's always a challenge for many organizations.
Yes, because to be honest, a lot of what I see so far is the lip service, where yes, it's a great marketing and PR tool to put it on social media and how everyone is invested, but when you really look behind the curtain is where you see the gaps still exist. Thank goodness there is slowly but surely a change happening to bring on more external help, to really build little like resource teams to make sure they talk about what is driving people, what is in everyone's head, to really talk openly about it. But we still have ways to go because I think we've really missed the mark for the past 10, 15 years. I mean, the amount of self-help books out there on management and building teams and all of that, I think there are millions of books out there, an all-time high, but then it's just like living literally on papers, but not in real life. I think it takes, again, research and a lot of great facts to drive home the point of what engagement, of what diverse teams can really bring to the table and how they can change the bottom line. Because let's be honest, as much as we all love to talk about it, it's still a business, it's still looking at top line revenue. There is enough data there to really show what a difference it can make to build diverse teams, to build engaged teams, and the numbers speak for themselves. But it's also about building that group of allies and champions within an organization to drive it home. Because what I've also seen management do is provide trainings, but then no one uses it. No one wants to go to it. It's also making sure there is time for everyone to engage, because where there is like ask for money, you'll see there is also a crunch for time. Again, going back to everything's critical, everything's busy. It really takes a strong executive team, a strong management team to really declare it not just as lip service, but yeah, doing it. And for example, I'm doing it right now with my team, where we also say, okay, we want to do all those things, but we're going to measure it. Because something we also want to be really, for the sake of everyone, want to become okay with is that we measure things, not for the sake of driving everyone insane and putting 100 different reports on the table, but showing that it works. Because otherwise it's just going to be lip service, everyone's just going to talk about it, but everyone wants to see proof. Everyone wants to see proof. And I think a lot of the folks that are advertising or advocating for diverse cultures, I want them to also advocate for metrics. It cannot just be a world where we all, gather around the fireplace and sing Kumbaya. It is also about bringing both worlds together. There's no boohoo on systems, structures. You need both to drive the point home.
That makes a lot of sense. You got to be data driven and really see how it's
Yes.
improving. And top down, executives will be surprised by how much this diversity and this communication collaboration actually supports the business. A question came in from the audience. Companies often prefer to think in stereotypes instead of trying to explore and understand employees. In your opinion, what could be the top 3 steps to prevent such negligence?
Oh, I love that, because I'm actually a huge fan of stereotypes, and here is the reason why. Again, it's become such a boo-boo word because we've seen it in such a negative context. We often use stereotypes to call out the negatives. Like, for example, Germans. Oh my God, it's like all about time, and oh my God, so specific and detailed, and we're scary with our language, and we don't have any humor and all of that. What about we just take those stereotypes and actually take the positives out of it? Because that is, again, where it starts to build a diverse team, where you say, well, this is what you're good at. It's the same conversation about where the strengths are. I think we've become so conditioned to use the word vulnerability for once. And yes, I'm rolling my eyes because it's all about, oh my God, let me share my weaknesses. I always say to my teams, weaknesses are there for a reason. They make us human. So why can't we just focus on our strength? Bring it all out. And you build a team according to strength and what is not missing. So my 3 things that I would say is gather everyone's skill set, gather everyone's strength, be transparent, share it. Say, okay, this is why I'm at this table. This is why I'm in this team. This is what I bring to the table. And then you will see that it's not really about stereotypes, or you can say, wow, well, she's German, but wow, she's diligent, right? Someone else from a different culture, I'm going to be now really stereotyped, right? Like Italian or Spanish, it's like, wow, at least I'll bring some, yes, can we all just also enjoy life or take a break and celebrate success? It's something that we're not good at, right? I mean, but this is where I'm talking about strength, and suddenly you see it's a strength-based conversation and not necessarily cultural or stereotype. Because it's about oneself, taking ownership and accountability of what everyone can do. But I would love if we would talk about strength much more than we always like to ask for weaknesses in interviews or whatever. It's like, where did you fail? And we bring people in such a negative mindset, because when you ask them different questions, like, tell me the time you were the most engaged. Tell me the time where you could really show your strength. What happens in people is they light up. They're like, whoa, I'm suddenly like all positive. I'm suddenly like, my confidence is coming out. It really is that simple. It's a magical trick, but it's that simple.
That's really interesting. It's a really interesting take, but let me just kind of challenge you a little bit with that answer. And assuming that, stereotypes still are perceived negatively, what are tips and tricks that you can offer, I guess, even employees to, make bottom up change or help management or executive management actually extract those positive elements from, putting people in certain boxes and then having that influence, their career trajectory or, options as well.
Yeah, no, listen, and it's not just because, again, we talk, it all goes away. It still is there. But I always say it's show examples, lead by examples, talk about it. When you say, it's like, listen, I had that conversation like, oh my God, you just think in black and white. Fine, I'll take it in as feedback. I'll take it in even as constructive criticism. But then you lead out of that with the positives that come out of it. And what are the outcomes? And because it's not my way or it's not someone's way that I would do, in the end, it is about results and outcomes, right? And this is where I would challenge people. It's like, and you perhaps are in a stereotype for a reason. I love some of the stereotypes that might not be considered positive, but for me, it's about the outcome. And I trust you, and that's why I said in that talk about the 80-20, I don't need to completely understand you. I need to trust you because in the end, we're all in the same boat. We want to achieve something. We want to feel good about ourselves. We want to be productive. And so I trust you to be productive. And if you want to do this between 9 p.m. and 2 a.m., that's up to you. But I think it's about talking it and also not always fighting against it.
I understand.
Right? I mean, it's like, even with explaining it, you might not change preconceived notions, conceptions. It's all good. At times it's like, choose your battle, right? Like, show examples and get to the outcome and just accept that there are different ways. I think if we could all just accept that there are different approaches and that although I might be fine with my approach and always achieve results, it might not only be or it's not the only way. And I think a lot of that, hinders especially culturally diverse teams to get to an outcome because everyone feels they just need to talk about the approach all the time instead of saying, I'll trust you because you want to do good for the group. I wish sometimes, or I would love to see what happens if you just say this, okay, you try it. By the way, I had that with my team and there were a bunch of developers, consultants, everything. And I was like, listen, I want you to try. Guess what? Some of it will fail, some of it will work, and that is where we know what approach we want to use in the future. But we can talk about all of it, not see what's happening, or you do it and we'll see. And I'll have your back in trying without
Yeah.
much talking.
I completely understand that. And actually, I've historically, like when I would speak to my managers who, words matter, and the exact way that you say things, they translate into something. And I remember saying oftentimes to many managers, and it always surprised them when I would say this, that when they would say things like, do what you think, which feels kind of passive aggressive, I would say to them, why don't you change that terminology to, I trust your judgment. I trust you to make the right decision. And that has a completely different effect for the person than, last question. So where does building, diverse teams, where can it break down? Where have you seen failures, and how do you avoid such pitfalls? How do you do your best to do it right and, and have this succeed?
And that is, I once said something to an executive in my former life that wasn't perceived very well, but I fully stand by it still. That I was like, do not mistake cultural understanding or empathy with traveling business class to whatever country. What I mean by that is, it's not just the quick hop in or going on vacation, because that is one side of what we see. It takes a lot of hard work to understand another culture, to understand the drivers. It's not a matter of, oh, I'll just read a book and then I'll be good. It's about learning a language. It's about making an effort. It's about spending time. And again, a lot of the breakdowns I see is coming in with assumptions. Just because, and again, it's what I said before, it's not even done out of bad intention, but it's more, let me make my decision for you based on what I know. And this is not it's not gonna work. It might work for a while, but very soon you'll see lack of engagement. Very soon you'll see confusion. Very soon you'll see, how should I put it? Again, you might have a good idea, but you completely miss the mark because you just don't understand what's going on. And I think especially leaders often make the mistake that they think they need to know it all. What about the, I don't know, please help me to understand what needs to be done? And it's not a matter of a leader needs to know it all. No, it's about asking for help, asking for understanding. And once one of my team members would tell me what needs to be done, that is my job then to make sure that it happens, right? It's the biggest failure I see many times, best intentions, that you have those assumptions, or you think, which is another one, especially from big companies, to have a really, how should I put it, like a leadership team that is not diverse. They go into another country and they think one model fits all, which history has shown us over and over again that that doesn't work. You need to, before you go into a country, you need to know what are the differences, what is unique about a country. And many times if you feel like you're forced into one model because it works in one country, it doesn't work in another. There might be little, like little similarities, and it's fine to have, again, one message. But the biggest failure I see, if you think, oh, because it works in my country, it must work in your country. And that is one of the biggest failures, and also where you lose a lot of energy, a lot of time, and a lot of money.
Thank you, Isabella. These were such incredible insights. Thank you so much for being a really exceptional closing talk, a really important closing talk. We're so thankful that you were here with us at jsday and shared your wisdom with us and the community. We hope to see you face-to-face at the next one. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.